Unsyndicated presents Off the Air with Sean Baligian.
So glad you could join us for another edition of Off the Air. This is a special edition, of course, in conjunction with our friends at the Detroit Sports Commission. They've brought so many great events to our fine town, including the draft, which, fellas, I cannot believe it. We're only 51 days away. I still don't think the average person knows the circus that's coming to town, but we can get into that in a little bit. Of course, along with my friend Blake, who, of course, is part of the Mitch Albom Show and Sports Wrap at WJR. Let's welcome in our guest. You've probably read some of his work over the years. He's done a fantastic job. Freelance writer for Our Detroit. You've seen his articles in the Detroit Free Press. And after talking to him the last few days, I hope I don't make him blush, but I'm going to say Detroit Lions draft historian. Let's welcome him in. Bill Dow kindly joining us. And Bill, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us here. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Sean and Blake? Thanks for having me on. It's been fun reviewing the history of the Lions draft history. So it'll be great to talk about it.
You and I were joking as we were on the phone the other day. We are young enough to remember when this draft wasn't even televised, where guys like you and I had to read the Free Press or the late edition of the Free Press or the Detroit News to figure out who the Lions had even taken in the draft. Boy, have we come a long way with draft coverage, haven't we?
We sure have. And the real change occurred in 1980 with the advent of ESPN. They convinced the NFL, the owners were opposed to having a televised draft. And even originally Pete Rozelle was also, but then they decided, yeah, let's try it. And in 1980 was the first one. And the Lions had the first pick. They picked Billy Sims. And from then on, after they moved it out of New York and took it on the road, it's exploded, as we know. I mean, second to the Super Bowl in popularity. And people are talking about the NFL draft weeks after the Super Bowl ends. I mean, it's just a year-round thing now. And it's exciting. And what's going to happen in Detroit in April is going to be really great.
Blake, you're the young guy here. I wanted to go to you. I'm glad you started to speak up. You're the young guy here. And I think what you just heard Bill say rings true. Is you and I are both big college football fans as well, but I think the pecking order is probably the Super Bowl and the NFL draft in the sporting world today. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's just what I was going to say is it's crazy the spectacle it has become. Like even in my lifetime, like obviously like Bill was just saying, when I was a kid, it was always at Radio City Music Hall in New York. And now that it's gone on the road and it's grown like this and turned into this like marquee event, it's insane. The blow up.
Yeah, when you think about they're expecting 60 million worldwide viewers seeing Detroit April 25th, 26th, and 27th. And Kansas City had 300,000 people downtown. And here's Detroit, 4.5 hours or less drive from 6 other NFL cities. So there's going to be such an influx of fans from other NFL cities into the city. So they're expecting many more than 300,000 to be in Detroit. And there's going to be some beautiful drone shots again of the city. And it's going to be very exciting, I think.
Once again, Bill Dow kindly joining us as our friends from the Detroit Sports Commission are getting us ready for this. Want to remind everybody, speaking of the Detroit Sports Commission, is they urge people to go to www.visitdetroit.com/2024 NFL draft. You got all your info there, and you really should get the NFL One Pass app to get prepared for all of this. Bill, there are so many things to talk about, but you were telling me something I didn't know about, and I've been a lifelong fan of the Detroit Lions, and I wanted to start here because it reminds me in a certain regard, although the example that I'm going to bring up isn't, maybe as drastic, but the 1940s weren't very kind to this franchise. And in the late 1940s, this franchise was in a very precarious spot. I'll let you pick it up from there because I'm not sure a lot of Lions fans are aware of some of the things you're going to drop on everybody right here.
Yeah, I mean, we almost lost the Lions in Detroit. In fact, Edwin Anderson, who was the president in January of 1950, said, they had lost the previous 2 years any profit, and they were only averaging 19,000 at Briggs Stadium a game. And over the last 4 years of the 40s, they had only won 10 games. And so the headline was "No profit, no Lions." And he said, if the Lion fans don't come out, we're through. But remarkably, in early 1950, right after he said that, they made some moves that saved the franchise and catapulted him into the great 1950s period for the Lions. And that was when they drafted Leon Hart out of Notre Dame, a Heisman Trophy winner from 1949. They acquired Doak Walker through a draft trade. It was a trade of draft picks. He was the 48 Heisman Trophy winner. He arrives. He became Rookie of the Year in 1950. They hired Buddy Parker as an assistant coach to Bo McMillan, and the next year he became the head coach of the Lions and took them to the championships. And they acquired Bobby Lane in a trade for Bob Mann, a receiver who was a very good receiver out of Detroit, out of University of Michigan, and had starred for the Lions. And from then on, then they started having these great drafts. And so they turned the franchise around. And I could go over a little bit of what they did in the early 50s in the draft that built those championship teams where they won 3 world championships and 4 conference titles. And they really were America's team in the 50s. So I don't know if I could keep going.
I'd love to hear it. Yeah. Cause it for guys like me, that's, I heard all the stories from my dad, and we'll get into the work that Brad Holmes has done, but to put that in emphasis, they probably were the team of the 50s, right?
No, they really were. There's a great book out there by Richard Bach called "When the Lions Last Roared." It's came out last year, Wayne State Press. I highly recommend it. People want to read about some great Detroit Lion history, but what happened in the 51 draft, they drafted guard Dick Stanfill, who became a Hall of Famer, Dorn Dibble, Jim Doran, Jack Christensen, Chris's crew. He had that great defensive backfield in the 50s for the Lions. Laverne Torgerson, they all became starters. 52, they drafted Yale Larry, who became a Hall of Fame defensive back and punter. 53, Joe Schmidt, 7th round, Hall of Fame middle linebacker. Lou Carpenter, Carla Karlovaz, Ollie Spencer. These became all starters. 56, they had Howard Hopalong Cassidy, Heisman Trophy winner, Tom the Bomb Tracy out of Birmingham, Michigan, Gene Cronin. Anyway, it just goes on. And there's just they really built it up through the draft. And then, and in even 57, the 57 draft, Bill Glass, John Gordy, Terry Barr, Steve Junker, Ken Russell, they all became starters. They also drafted Jack Kemp, believe it or not, who became a star in the AFL. Yeah. He was a 17th round pick, but he was cut in the before the season started. And so anyway, but then they had a lot of hit and misses. And they made some big mistakes in the early 60s when they got into a bidding war. The AFL also had their own draft, and so we had the NFL draft. And we drafted some really great players who became Hall of Famers. Like in 1960, Johnny Robinson was a defensive back. He ended up going to Kansas City. The Lions were cheap. I mean, they did not want to sign these players. They did not want to get into a bidding war. 1962, they drafted John Hadel. They didn't sign him because he was outbid by the AFL, and he became a great quarterback. And anyway, then later in the 64 draft, Pete Beathard, Jerry Philbin, he became an all-pro defensive end. 64, they also drafted, believe it or not, Bill Parcells. But he quit the team at training camp at Cranbrook. And apparently there was a really hot day that day, and he walked away and he said, "It's too hot. I don't want to play pro football." That's how the Lions lost Bill Parcells. But then in 65, they drafted Tom Nowatzki. And and they also drafted Fred Biletnikoff in the 3rd round. He became this Hall of Fame receiver for the Oakland Raiders, and we ended up not signing him because we didn't want to get into a bidding war. We passed on Joe Namath. I don't think we ever would have signed him because he got quite a bit of money from the Jets. And then in the late 60s, they had some great drafts, like in 67, Mel Farr, Lem Barney, Paul Newmoff, Mike Weger. 68, Greg Landry, Earl McCullough, Charlie Sanders, Hall of Famer. And then it was like in the 70s, oh my gosh, some people they passed up you wouldn't believe. I don't know if you want to hear this, but
absolutely.
Well, for instance, in 1971, they drafted Bob Bell, and they passed on Jack Ham, Hall of Famer, Dan Deerdorf, Hall of Famer, Lyle Alzado. Herb Orvis, they drafted in 1972. They passed on Reggie McKenzie, the great offensive guard from Michigan who blocked for O.J. Simpson in Buffalo. 73, they drafted Ernie Price. They passed on Ray Guy, Hall of Famer, Joe DeLamielleure, Hall of Famer, Brad Van Pelt out of Michigan State, Dan Fouts, Hall of Fame quarterback. Ed O'Neill, they drafted. These are their first choices again. 1974, he was a linebacker. They passed on Lynn Swann, Dave Casper, Hall of Famer, Jack Lambert, Hall of Famer. 76, James Hunter, although he was good for the Lions, but they passed on Jackie Slater, a Hall of Famer, Harry Carson, a Hall of Famer, Steve Largent, Hall of Famer. Now, that's not to say that there weren't some other teams that passed on these guys too. Sure. But anyway, it just it goes on and on. Like in 83, James Jones, they passed on Jim Kelly, Hall of Fame quarterback, Dan Marino, Hall of Famer, Darryl Green, Hall of Famer. I mean, it just goes on like that. And unfortunately, it could go on and on here. But yeah, it was interesting to see that when I was doing the research in the last couple of days. Like, oh my gosh, how did they? But, they hung on to Russ Thomas way too long. That was Bill Ford's, one of his big problems was the people he hired around him. They were cheap. They didn't want to pay the players, and they just made some really poor picks. And they made some good picks, but they didn't sign people, and they passed so many people up.
It's so funny looking back at those old drafts when they were like 30 rounds.
Yeah, right.
Like it's just insane. Like these are multi-day events for us now because they're spectacles. Back then they were all-day events just because they were telegraphing in all the picks or however the hell they did it.
Oh, and some of the people they drafted, like in 1958, they drafted Ben Palucci, who became the Pistons doctor years later. In 1959, they drafted Ron Luciano, who became a very well-known American League umpire.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Like very, very low rounds, but
yeah.
It's kind of funny.
That's great. Bill Dow kindly joining us. And of course, we are doing this with our friends at the Detroit Sports Commission, only 51 days away. Cannot wait for this. I want to bring one up to you, and I'm not going to say it was as dramatic as the late 40s to be sure, but I always go back to the Barry Sanders draft because Bill, and I know I've told you this, Blake, I think that this franchise was at a very bad place after that 88 season. Bill, I'm sure you remember fans just stopped going to the Silverdome. That was like the first time that people were like, okay, enough of this. And if you go back and you look at the attendance for some of those games, it was really, really ugly. They needed some excitement. Boy, did they get some excitement when they drafted Barry.
Oh my gosh. It's so lucky that he dropped they got that pick at 3. And they in Green Bay, instead of picking Barry, picked Tony Mandarich out of Michigan State, who just didn't have a good career at all in the NFL. But we were very fortunate. What that really turned the fortunes around, obviously, for the Lions. It got everybody excited again about the franchise, and they were acquiring some good players obviously in the late 80s and the 90s. I mean, when you think they went to the conference championship. Got blown out by the Redskins, but it was still exciting that see that team do what they did. But then they dropped off, and I don't think that's going to happen now with what they have in place.
No, and I that's part of the reason why I'd like to talk to you because I think you mentioned it earlier. As a guy who has studied these drafts as you have, what Brad Holmes has done in his, I will say it, brief tenure so far,
Right.
is remarkable. When you look back already at what he's brought in and what is yet to come, I always use the term, Bill, he built a credit line. His credit line has got to be sky high. What jumps out to you about the Brad Holmes draft so far?
Oh my gosh. Well, 3 years in a row, 2021, 22, 23, he drafted virtually almost all starters and unbelievable players. And when you think that in 2021 they were 3-13, 2 years later they're 12-5. I mean, I looked over the season records of the Lions. There's never been a more dramatic turnaround. And even though the late 40s Lions turned into the World Championship teams, it didn't jump that fast. Like they were 6-6 in 1950, and then they were over 551, and then they won the World Championship in 52 and 53, and then 57. But from how low things were in Detroit with the Lions, and after Quinn and Matt Patricia, my God, we thought, is this going to go on forever? And then thankfully Sheila Ford Hamp takes over and gets Chris Spielman as an advisor to the president, and they get Brad Holmes, and Dan Campbell and Holmes. It's like in Ben We Trust. I mean, I don't know how anybody could second guess Brad Holmes at this point. Mm-mm. I mean, why do you pick him? Even if he's going to miss out sometimes, everybody does. But my gosh, when you look at those drafts, like 2021, Penny Sewell, Eli McNeil, Amon St. Brown in the 4th round, Derek Barnes in the 4th round, and then 2022, Aiden Hutchinson, Jameson Williams, Josh Paschal, Kirby Joseph, and then last year, my gosh, Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. I mean, it's incredible, really. I mean, and what a great move that was, really, with the trade of Stafford for Jared Goff, obviously, and the draft picks we got. I mean, it worked out for everybody.
It worked out for a young man like Blake, who saw nothing but losing in his life. And I mean, really, Blake, I think you can speak to this. And all of a sudden you're like, what's going on? I mean, this is a competent franchise right now. And a lot of those young guys, and I have fun with Blake a little bit because, Blake, I think it's safe to say you were jaded growing up, and in the era in which you grew up, it's hard not to be excited about where the future's going now, Blake.
I mean, think about so I'm sitting here, we're going through this, and I'm just looking through drafts now. I'm being that guy. But think about the last few drafts compared to 2014 when we drafted Eric Ebron, 2013, those drafts, and it's now, like you were just saying, we're drafting so well, and there's such we drafted 4 starters this past year, and Sam Laporta, you could argue, is one of the 3 best tight ends in the NFL, and he was in the 2nd round. Yeah, it's just that flip it's insane, and it's not easy to do, obviously.
It shows you the power of the NFL and the popularity of it. When you think, Blake, that when growing up, how horrible the Lions have been, yet you stayed a fan of pro football and were rooting for this team. There's been times when the Tigers were so down for so long that they lost a generation of fans, baseball fans, who they're always lousy. I mean, and sadly, I mean, the Pistons, the way one of the worst stretches in their history. I mean, but the NFL, it's got the power of the NFL, my gosh. And for you to hang in there and see the successes you have.
I had to get pulled in, though. Sean had to pull me in this year. But yes, yeah. I'm a huge football fan, but the Lions have been tough in my lifetime, my friend. Very tough.
Should I ask you who your favorite team was before last year's Lions? Or
I've always been a players kind of guy. I would attach on to players like Joe Burrow, obviously Patrick Mahomes. I would just watch teams that I enjoy the players on the team more than anything else.
Right.
Bill, can I, and we're going to finish up with you in just a second. We can't thank Bill Dow enough for joining us and our friends at the Detroit Sports Commission for bringing us together. You touched on something. I'm going to come out of left field with this, no pun intended, but at some point in time in my lifetime, when I was a young person, it was at least my perception that maybe baseball was the biggest sport in the nation, America's pastime, et cetera, et cetera. Is there, I guess, a 0.0 for you where it flipped? Because I don't care who you're a fan of. The NFL has been king in this country for a long time now. And as a young man growing up, I go back to, believe it or not, it seems to me like the Dallas-Frisco NFC Championship game just kind of made everything pop and the NFL just leapfrogged. Is there a moment to you where you feel like maybe the NFL jumped over MLB, late 70s, early 80s, et cetera, because make no mistake about it, the NFL has been king for a good 40 plus years now.
Oh, it has. I really think it was started in the 70s with the advent of Monday Night Football. I think that was so unique to have a game. Not only did they have their games on Sundays, but then they have that premier game on Monday night. That brought such a large television audience. And then before you know it, there's Thursday night football, there's Sunday night football. I mean, I think the television aspect of it was huge. And the way they covered the game so well it's been very entertaining. And I think, baseball for a lot of people, and have been a big baseball fan. I think compared to football, it's just been so slow, and for a lot of people, and it's just not as fast action as pro football, and that's a challenge that they're going to have, I think, with baseball. Thankfully they speeded up the game, but some of those great Super Bowls that occurred, like you said, Dallas, San Francisco, Clark catching that touchdown. There were those dramatic, The one thing that really got the attention was in 58 when the Colts won against the Giants at the last second when Alan Amici went over the end zone. It was that they say that TV moment really took off. And then when they signed the big contract with CBS, I think it was 61. And that's when they started putting the emblems on their helmets, and it became more of like the Lions first time in 61. Green Bay put their GB on the helmet. They started, and Pete Rozelle, to his credit, I mean, he was a genius. His marketing aspect of building the league. And then finally, like in 1980, when he was at first reluctant to televise the draft, he said, let's try it. And then all of a sudden, boom, they see what they have. And I don't know, they just from a marketing standpoint, the way they built up this league, and it's quite remarkable, really.
It really is. Bill, this was a great conversation with you. I love hearing about this stuff. Certainly, I'm going to say it, draft historian. It sounds like NFL historian as well. You've seen him in Our Detroit Free Press as well. Bill Dow joining us. Really appreciate you sharing the stories with us. It does put it into perspective why so many people, like my father as well, became jaded, and it was because of so many poor decisions that this franchise made. But I'll tell you, Bill, I'm an optimist. I've always said get the right people in place, and you can get the job done. And boy, these guys are getting it done right now.
They sure are. They have the right people in place. It's going to be very exciting to watch them the next few years for sure.
No doubt about it.
Thanks, Sean and Blake, for having me. It's great talking with you both.
Fantastic stuff. Bill Dow kindly joined us here on Off the Air, and Blake, I love, I think one of the reasons why I like you is you're one of those guys as well. You appreciate the stories of yesteryear and things like that. Hearing from a historical perspective, some of these things, honestly, how many people knew this franchise, they were going to go? I mean, that's crazy. And they had to get it right in the 50s. And they did, and wouldn't you know it, they became the team of the 50s. And the importance of the draft, you cannot put a price tag on it.
100%. And that's what's just crazy about what Brad Holmes has done in the last couple of years and how good his drafts have been, because you don't always see that. I mean, obviously, we've seen the really bad in our lifetimes. I know you have. I even have. So it's crazy.
I brought it up. I'm serious when I say this. I I think my generation, we were a little too dramatic. Okay. And let me tell you why, because when you hear a younger person like Blake, or you hear, my son complain about how tough they had it, I think my generation is apt to just jump up and go, "Oh, you guys haven't seen anything. What are you talking about?" And you know what, Blake? We're right, and we didn't even know it. You haven't seen anything, because at least guys like me, I saw them make the playoffs in 83. I saw them make the playoffs all those times in the 90s, whether it be, 91 or 93, 94, 95, et cetera, et cetera. You guys basically saw them go 0-16 and then finally get in the playoffs and get crushed by the Saints, have your heart broken in that crazy game against Dallas, get crushed by Seattle, and get crushed by, the whole Patricia Quinn era. And that's the thing that drives me nuts. And that's what I tell people all the time. It's like, my son was so excited in 2011. He was 11 at the time. They get absolutely crushed in that game. They get crushed by the Seahawks. They get, their hearts broken in that Dallas game. So, when people are saying you kids haven't seen nothing, well, you know what? They're right. They hadn't seen nothing. And then enter Brad Holmes. And make no mistake about it, it all started with the draft, making that deal, getting those extra draft picks, and most importantly, making those extra draft picks count.
Oh, and like your generation will be like, "Oh, we lost a generational talent." Oh, so did we, Calvin. Like, it happened to all of us.
Yep.
Like both of the, it's
it really is crazy when you think about it. And some of those good teams that they had in the 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 and going into 16. And I always say it was our first year doing the network stuff in 2016. The Lions were 9-4. Okay. Everybody felt real good about them. They lost their last 3 games and then got pummeled in that game against Seattle. So, I mean, that's what you guys grew up with. But I want to remind people, make sure you go to www.visitdetroit.com/2024 NFL Draft. You got all the info you need there. Download the NFL One Pass app for access to the free draft viewing in the area and in and around Campus Martius. One of the things that I should have brought up with Bill, but I didn't, is, here we're talking about how the draft has blown up. And listen, there are going to be hundreds and thousands of people here coming and commencing their matriculating, to quote Hank Stram, their way to Detroit. And we touched on, how the draft has blown up, but Blake, I say again, what the combine was even 10 years ago and what the combine is now is incredible. I mean, during that span, everybody and their brother seems to be down in Indianapolis. You've got footage all over the social media, not to forget that NFL Draft is running 100% combine, 100% day and night. I mean, just think about where the combine has come in your lifetime, pal.
Yeah, I think that the combine is like the perfect social media thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to sit there and watch the whole combine, but all of these things are so like easy to clip, and even the quarterbacks just clip one Joe Milton throw and it's going to go viral. And it's just, the combine is the perfect social media event, because I don't want to watch the whole thing. And no one really does, except for the real nerds. But I can grasp and see the big moments that happen during it.
I couldn't agree with you more in regards to sitting and watching the whole thing. Do you know what I do? This is my tradition, okay? If I have a day where I'm around the house, it's just on my television. Does that make sense? It's just there. And if I hear something that kind of piques my interest, I'll go walk around the corner and take a look at it. If I hear a conversation that piques my interest, but I'm with you. I can't sit there and watch that stuff anymore. I openly admit I used to be into that. I used to be into, what's his 40 time? Some of the other stuff is kind of silly. And if you think that comes into the equation with a lot of these picks, I think you're sadly mistaken. But now, Blake, to describe it for me, it's more on in the background. If I see something on Twitter that interests me, I'll look at the clip. But the 100% nonstop, quote unquote, information, to me, what comes out of this, and I learned this from my old pal, longtime Lion beat writer Tom Kowalski, is at the dinners after each day. That's when, you kind of get the movers and the shakers in a room and you start to, hear what guys really think. Or do you? Because as many people often say, this is lying season, not LION, LYING. I mean, teams are going to lie to you, and they're gonna pimp this guy, or they're gonna downgrade this guy because they're hoping that nobody's in on the guy that they have. But put it all together, and it's just another reason why the NFL is king. I mean, look, it is 11 and a half months a year, which is exactly the way they designed it, Blake.
Don't you think it's weird that Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't there at all?
Yes.
Yes. I was looking up, I looked up, what's his 40 time? Because I think it'll be really interesting to see what he ran, because his running style and body is just, and he wasn't even there, for interviews, none of it. And it's just at least go to, I don't know. It was just weird. That whole thing is so weird.
I want to remind everybody the draft in Detroit requires support of the local community. The 2024 NFL Draft and the Community Engagement Legacy Initiative is made possible through the generous support of the local civic, corporate, and philanthropic community. Supporters include Visit Detroit, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Rocket Mortgage, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Flagstar Bank, General Motors, Huntington National Bank, Penske Corporation, PNC Bank, and the Skillman Foundation. It really does take a village to not only get an event like this, but to make an event like this work. And we are only 51 days away. Blake, it sounds so strange to hear 51 days away right now. It really does. And I've confessed this to you as well, and I have no problem saying it here. I don't know why the NFL schedule release date has become such an important day to me, but it has. I don't know if you're the same way. I'm not sure you and I have ever talked about this. When they have the schedule release, there is nothing like, first, of course, studying the schedule for the Lions, but who's the opening Thursday night game? Looking at every Monday game, looking at the Thursday games, looking at the Sunday night games. The second place that I go, I must confess, though, every time is, who are the 3 Thanksgiving Day games? That's the second place I go. I don't know why that's turned into such a big thing to somebody like me, but once the draft is over, then you're on to the next thing. And, the schedule's coming out, which is exactly the way the league likes it.
Yeah, 100%. I do the same thing. I want to see who's playing, especially on those Monday night games. I want to see exactly who's playing and go through. And I like playing the schedule game. I like figuring out the record. I do it every time. You have to. We can complain about it like everyone doing it, but you got to do it.
It's dumb. It is. It is an exercise in futility, because each and every year, Blake, I mean, let's go back to this past Lions season. Some of the games that looked like easy W's early in the season didn't turn into easy W's later in the season because teams changed during the course of the season. I grew up in an era where you knew what a team was. Yeah, that didn't mean that you didn't see the occasional upset pop here and there, but going into the season, you knew exactly what a team was. That NFL is long gone. It really is. I present to people as Exhibit A the Green Bay Packers last year. A lot of people thought that the Packers were just not going to be a good team, and early on, they did not look like a good team. Remember how the Lions jumped on them in Lambeau? Well, somebody forgot to tell Jordan Love that he was a bust and he was never going to make it, because the way that kid came on And the way that team came on was downright frightening last year. So it's another reason why playing the schedule game is an exercise in futility. I openly admit that, okay? But look at the other side of my mouth. Like you, Blake, I play it incessantly.
You have
I play it
to.
incessantly.
Why would they give us a schedule if we're not going to figure out the wins and losses 3 months in advance? Why would they do that?
Well, then don't give us a schedule. If you don't
Yeah.
want us to do it, don't give us the schedule.
Give us it week to week. I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Who's your draft guru? Like, who's your go-to if you're reading draft stuff, if you're, scrolling Twitter? Who do you like? Are you a Mel Kiper guy? Todd McShay?
Okay.
Daniel Jeremiah?
I think, like a lot of things that have lasted for a while, Mel Kiper's kind of become a caricature of himself. I really do. But can I also say this? I think the draft and draft coverage doesn't become what it was without Mel Kiper.
100.
Mel Kiper was something brand new. And quite frankly, I don't think that Mel Kiper gets the respect he deserves because of it, Blake. I really don't.
Well, yeah, because he's wrong, like, consistently.
All the time. All the time.
I think the difference is, though, it's not just that he's wrong. It's because he has all the character and he just crashes miserably. That's why.
He's adamantly wrong more often than not,
Still hasn't retired from Jimmy Clausen.
I think that he was something totally new and different in the early 90s, and he really birthed a giant industry. He did. I mean, whether people want to admit it or not, I don't care. You didn't hear that talk. You didn't see guys like that before Mel Kiper. So I like Daniel Jeremiah. I like Scott Bischoff, to keep it local. I think that he does a good job. I'd love to get some of these guys on. Maybe we can catch up with our mutual friend, Scott Bischoff, sometime. But I'm a peruser, Blake. And what I mean by that is I go to multiple spots. I like to read multiple things. And so in that regard, I'm not sure that I have a number one quote unquote go-to guy. Some of the mock drafts, all right, for all the wrong reasons, some of the mock drafts at NFL.com, and I'm not going to mention any names, are so bad that I go look at them like you would look at a kind of a train wreck. You know what I mean? Because they have a couple guys doing mock drafts that are just there for name only, so to speak. But no, you know what? Honestly, I don't think I have like that bona fide go-to guy. I'm a peruser. I go to multiple spots for multiple information, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. I'm a Daniel Jeremiah guy through and through.
Yeah,
if
I had to pick one, I'll go with him.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one. Yeah.
Okay.
Once again, I want to remind people, go to www.visitdetroit.com/2024 NFL draft. You got all your info there. Our friends at the Detroit Sports Commission are highly suggesting that you download the NFL One Pass app for access to free draft viewing in the area in and around Campus Martius Park, and the free NFL draft experience at Hart Plaza on the Detroit Riverwalk. Oh, by the way, voted the best Riverwalk in the country by USA Today in 2023. Blake, some final thoughts before we get out of here on a Wednesday morning?
Rome Odunze is the best wide receiver in this draft. You can't change my mind. I love Rome Odunze.
You hate Ohio State so much.
I do.
You're willing to go that. I think Marvin Harrison's a freak. I really do.
He is a freak, but like, you got to show up. Just show up. Rome Odunze is out there running the 3-cone drill for like 16 hours. It's a grinder.
Okay, we talk about this all the time. Teams knew what he was before all this happened, right? I think it's safe to say. But is this a guy that really, oh, Lord, forgive me, improved his stock by doing, as you just said, the last few days? I think you could make that argument, because I say it all the time. This guy's stock is rising makes me giggle all the time. These NFL guys know exactly what they're looking at. They already have, but occasionally there is a guy that can go out and really put on a show. And Blake, to your point, he might be a guy that, Lord forgive me, improved his stock.
100. Yeah. I mean, I really like his game. I really do. Right. You know how much we watched a lot of Washington this year. Mm-hmm. You and I both. Mm-hmm. You were big on Washington preseason. I got into them and then had to beat them myself. But yeah, no, we watched a lot, and he is a special player.
Had to beat them myself. Gosh. Dude, you should gloat. You should. I'm serious. You won the national championship, man. Sorry, bragging rights are squarely in Ann Arbor until further notice. Make no mistake about that. All right, we got to get out of here. Thanks to Bill Dow. Thank you to our friends from the Detroit Sports Commission. We are going to be doing shows just basically designated to them. I think we got 3 more on the docket leading up to the draft, a mere 51 days away. I can say tomorrow on What the Puck, one of the best enforcers and characters of all time in the National Hockey League, Chris Knuckles Nyland. Yeah, we're going to have Knuckles on the podcast. That is 8:00 tomorrow night. Blake, I'm going to see if we can catch up with our buddy Gordy Brown from the Rockers as well. Big weekend coming up for the Rockers. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Once again, thanks to Bill Dow and our friends at the Detroit Sports Commission. For Blake, I'm Sean. We'll see you.
Off the Air with Sean Baligian, featuring Sean Baligian and Blake Matrazak. Produced by Todd Losey and Blake Matrazak. Executive produced by Sean Baligian and Todd Losey. Theme song, incidental music, and related sound effects are from Play It Loud by Jam Studio. Engineering, mixing, and graphic design support provided by the Unsyndicated podcast team. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Off the Air with Sean Baligian on all your favorite channels. While you're there, be sure to rate and review the podcast. Got something to say to Sean? Call the Unsyndicated hotline at 248-237-3257.